There were some issues regarding our last conversation that needed to be concluded. You know, when Pere is on one side, Doc is on the other. Well, I'm not on any side, but I just say what we need to do. Home, they say, is still home. It's home sweet home, so let's build Nigeria, build Africa. But if you choose to go elsewhere, then you must have what the requirements are. That aside, let's move on now to discuss around International Women's Day. Tomorrow will be 8th of March, 2025, but we cannot end the week without talking about International Women's Day, and that's why we had to go bring in women who are formidable, women who are icons when you talk about how women have evolved and are taking the bull by the horn. I'm not saying we're waiting for you to hand it to us, you know, a la carte. We're not waiting for you to give power to us a la carte. We know it's buffet, so we've gone there with our own plate and we're serving ourselves, taking the bull by the horn. So this morning we have in the studio Irene Aguh, who is a Chief Executive Officer, Revie, who has come this morning to share thoughts with us on International Women's Day, because the theme is talking about escalating what women have been doing and accelerating. So we're going to be looking at, if we say accelerate action, on what level do we need to accelerate action? Where are we as women? Where do we need to take it to? Because there are some movements now that are getting some people uncomfortable, particularly men. When men hear of feminists, or when some people hear of feminists, they get uncomfortable. All of that is what we're going to put on the table today as we discuss. So welcome, Irene Aguh, the CEO, Revie.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. It was nice to walk in while you were talking the first time. Okay.
Congratulations, it's our month.
It is our month.
Yes. You know, we're not giving the men any chance
at all
to take any day out of it.
At all.
Because we're rubbing it in their face that the entire month of March is ours. Yes.
Exactly. I love that, honestly.
We love women, and we find that women are awesome and great. And celebrating women for us is something that is worth doing, and never grew up in an environment where women are valued, and so it's good that the world recognizes that, and then of course giving them the right pride of place in the society.
Yes, and if you want it 3 times in a year, it's fine.
But that 3 times in a year would mean that 3 times in a year you would cook, but you can't cook. You probably make tea.
Salt. Maybe there will be too much salt in it.
I'll take you to training school.
We'll look for something that you can do for women. That 3 times a year celebration.
Although we just told Blessing she should be ready to do the breakfast, lunch, and dinner today, and we don't mind really. And I think that's our contract.
That I should do breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yes.
Why?
Yes. On her bill.
On my bill.
On your bill.
Oh yes.
That's very interesting.
No, not on my bill. Not on my bill, because I also replied him that men who are married have had chefs in their homes they do not pay.
Exactly.
So for just 1 month, please, you can handle that.
On your bill the entire month.
On your bill the entire month. All right, let's get into the conversation. So the theme this year is accelerate action. If we're saying accelerate action, move it up. What action are we even taking? What action do we need to take? Let's do a backtracking and look at where we're coming from, where we are. If you look at today's woman, what would you say regarding the journey so far?
I would say we've come a long way, right? If you think about what women are able to do now, the kind of rooms that women are stepping into, we've come a long way. But the thing is, we still have a long way to go. So that's the reason we're having this conversation about accelerating action, right? One thing that I realize a lot of women have become comfortable with is the fact that the change that we want to see will not happen in our generation. It might not happen in the next generation, but we're trying to bring it as fast as possible, right? How do we get to a point where women have equal rights, equal access to opportunities as men? So I would say that, we're in a good place. We still have more to do.
Okay, so now let's talk about moving it up. We're going to segment this. So let's begin from education, talking about educating the woman. So they say that knowledge is power. In order for you to be able to take power and even assert your right, you need to have knowledge. So in educating women, how do we need to accelerate the action? Are there certain types of education we should now focus that better empowers the woman?
I would say yes. If you think about the family, because that's the first place that you start to learn, right? Mothers need to be able to teach their daughters that you deserve more, you can demand more, and you should take up space, right? That starts there. Now, when you move up into like formal education, schools, teachers, all of that, those are the first people that we see and we emulate, right? Women in those spaces, and I'm saying women in those spaces because the honest truth is we have to drive the action ourselves, right? We're the people that have to demand for it. I feel like it's a joint action that needs to happen, but people in those spaces need to make sure that we're not just setting good examples for the girls that are there, but we're also showing them what's possible, right? If you think about when people were growing up, it's like, oh, here are the careers that you can do as a woman. Here are the careers that, it doesn't occur to you as a woman that this is an option for you, right? So we need to start showing girls that this is an option. This is something that you can do. This is the way that you can belong to the world, or basically like make an impact in the world in a bigger way.
Okay, so let's now talk about the difference now. You've highlighted that growing up there were certain careers that you were told, or women were told, you can't go into this, or this is what is befitting of a woman. One of them was nursing. One of them was...
You can be a teacher, you can be a nurse.
Yes, and they give you reasons to tell you, okay, so this careers are flexible, men admire women in that field. If you say I want to go into engineering and they ask, okay, what branch of engineering? So mechanical engineering, you're like, you realize that's a male-dominated field. So all of that has changed right now.
Sure.
But still, when it comes to certain fields, we don't have enough representation of women there. When we talk about sciences, it seems like the new generation are now creating their own path and moving towards entertainment, moving into certain fields. But it seems like those fields they're going into are not areas where policies are made, are not areas that give women the voice as it should be. So how do we manage this and strategically tailor education into one that gives the woman the chance to be the change maker?
So I like that you mentioned the kind of categories that they're going to, entertainment and all of that. One thing I realized is that people are chasing the money.
Okay.
Right? So they've seen footballers make money, they've seen entertainers make money. There's this new boom, like the internet has evolved into what it is right now. TikTok videos, you see people dancing and all of that. And I don't think that's bad, right? There will be content creators, there will be people that are doing things like that. However, I do think that, yes, she's right in the sense that in those fields that, mechanical engineering, all the sciences, right? We have a little, like you ask people and you're like, oh, how many women in your department? They say 2, 3. And then in the end, you ask how many women are practicing, right? I know that people have started creating women-focused groups that basically bring women into maybe like secondary school graduates. They bring them, they try to train them, try to place them, right? But I do think that this is something that needs to be talked about a lot more. You can be an aeronautical scientist. You can be, there's so many things that we can be. And we need to actually get into the higher places because you're right, if we don't get there, we cannot change the policies that are sort of suppressing us. So I think that in every category, right, people that are already in, men and women alike, need to start having conversations about bringing those women in, showing the girls that it's not just entertainment that you can do. It's beautiful, right? Creating content, it's hard work, I get it, right? But we also need more women in the other spaces. So it's like, how do we also just start showing them the possibilities of making money and of building a career that doesn't affect, because remember that when they teach you about careers, they tell you, oh, this can affect your family later. If you're this type of person, or if you do this kind of work, how will you handle your family when you marry? Those are conversations that we need to stop having. Let's focus on the actual value. What are the kind of jobs that we can do? What are the benefits of the jobs? How are these people going to make money? I feel like if we start showing them the money, the way to grow in these careers, we will actually get a lot of people to switch from this thinking into more, I don't want to say more, into differentiated, career paths.
Okay. I grew up in an environment, I had a father who was a farmer and a mother who was a farmer. And they were doing differently. And most of the time, I see my mother having more money than my father as we grew up. And she take more of the bill. And they really have no issue. And I'm asking myself, what exactly do we want when we say accelerate action? Where exactly are we going to it?
Okay. So what's interesting is that you say this, and it's true for a lot of homes. For example, I remember I did a stint in the East where, we had to work, had to do some research. And I realized that a lot of women in Eastern homes are, carrying the families. However, that that's happening inside. That's not the way that a lot of the women project it outside. It's I'm doing the work, I'm making the money, I'm taking care of the family. But because society has told me that I have to bend low, I have to conform, what I do is I tell people that it's my husband that's doing it, right? Now, what that means is that the other young girls outside that are seeing you that don't know what is happening are hearing, oh, man is taking care, man is making money, man is feeding the family. And that's fine. Like, I'm not saying that it's a one-person rule, but in terms of accelerating action, what we want now is that we're trying to get women to places where we have equal access to opportunities. Now, remember that farming is one sector, right? But think of all the other sectors that we have. Like, think of all the other large corporate sectors that we have. If you ask people, who are the richest people in the world right now? How many people will you mention that are female?
Well, I think my way of looking at it, again, I think it's from the communal level, from where we're coming from.
True.
Because I feel that all the things we talk about, they, for me, really non-existent as a person. One of the issues that a lot of people argue about was the fact that, once you come to an husband's house, for example, it seems that the husband is the one in charge, right of inheritance and things like that. Now, the community where I come from, now there are two sides to it.
Okay.
Now, my mother, in her house, is a man.
Okay.
Oh, yes. It's a man. And the society recognizes it as that.
Okay.
And she plays very, very fundamental role. Whether it's burial, whether it's building, whatever that is happening. In her father's house, she's a man.
Okay.
And so equity says that you can't be a man in your father's house and then come and be a man in your husband's house. So what right that seems that is not giving at this one other side is actually giving on the other side. And you also see that even for women to women, that then of course, because in her father's house, she seems to even be the Lord over those who are married into that home, not necessarily the man. Now, people have argued that the problem of the woman is actually the woman and not the men. Okay. What's your take?
Okay, so first thing, I would say three things. First thing is you say your mother in her father's house is a man.
Yeah.
But your mother is a woman. What does is a man mean? That's a question I have. Then we move into what's my take about women. The honest truth is I've heard a lot of times that women are the biggest guardians of patriarchy, right? It's understandable, right? If you think about slavery, the way that slavery worked is that they bought us, like they bought black people from black people. They moved us into plantations and they put black people in charge of the black people. That's the way that these things work, right? When you create a system and you want to push an agenda, the biggest marketers of that agenda will be somebody in the system. All you have to do is find the person that will channel it, right? I think that that's the reason why people say, the biggest problem of women are women, right? But the honest truth is, I feel like the biggest problem, people, because we're all complicit in some way. Now, when you talk about your mother being a man in her place, I also think that it's context specific, because some people come from homes where your parents are good, your parents are flowing, like they find ways to, it doesn't have to be 50-50, 90-10, 20-30, everybody's just carrying the weight as it goes, right? And you learn that that's the way that you should be. However, in a lot of other homes, they don't have that. They have 100 or nothing. They have, when they go into the workplace, they have 100 or nothing. And they enter the workplace with that very demure, very like, oh my God, I don't deserve to be here, right? I cannot get this job. It's fine if this man says that the other man that's working the same role as me is getting paid more, even though we have the same level of experience, just because from my background, like where I come from, my community, women are lower. So I think it's context specific. I think that if we're from families that, our mothers have been strong, we also have to acknowledge that privilege and remember that we're the exception.
Okay, before I move on to pray, just a minute to button here. So let's get back to that. Your mother was a man in her home.
Yeah.
What it means. Now, does it mean that when it comes to certain role in society, there are roles society have cut out clearly for men, that certain cultures allow women to perform? So if she assumes that role in her culture, she's seen as a man because the culture identifies that this role is for men. Is that a narrative that is favorable to both gender? Because we know that each gender has their capabilities. True. They're special in both ways. True. Should we, if we're talking about accelerating action, should the action be now to say, let's not stereotype, whether these stereotypes are enforced in certain cultures, but let's break away from whatever stereotype that is a hindrance? Because in some cultures, she will not be allowed to function as that. True. They will say you are a woman, this is a man's role. But in another culture, yes, this is a man's role, but you can't function.
Yeah, but even beyond the role, is the level of authority and the voice that she's given. You see, that's the point I'm making. Now you find that, you say, in her husband's house, it seems to have been denying the voice. But she has an active voice in her father's home, even though she's a woman. And decisions are not taken when she's not sitting. You understand it? So, to that extent, she's really not marginalized. I have a wife who is the firstborn of a father. Now, traditionally, when they say inheritance, they say, it's the firstborn male. But the firstborn male is the second. But they don't take a decision in the house without her endorsing it. So, what's the level of marginalization?
Okay, so I think that I remember a couple of years there was a conversation around feminism or something. And I remember that somebody said, feminism is a different fight for different people. For some women, it is, please let me drive a car. For some other women, it is, pay me what I'm worth. And for the other people, it is, I'm tired today. I've been cooking the entire time. Today, let me just rest. So I think that, again, it's context specific, right?
Yeah.
Marginalization comes in different ways. And remember that it's the person that's feeling the heat that will tell you the heat they're feeling, right? And it's not necessarily a fact of, I feel this way all the time. This is a standard we've set right now, right? And I'm not comfortable with the standard that we set. You say, okay, in her father's house, she's a strong person. But that's not the same for everybody else. If you think about inheritance law, for example, for a lot of our local cultures, I'm Eastern, right? So it means that from where I come from, a lot of times, it's the men that own the things. So you have a female child, you can have 20 houses. Your female child doesn't necessarily have a hope of getting it. Obviously, with modern families, your female child is fine. But with more traditional families, it's like, you're going to your husband's house, what do you need it for? So I think that's where the marginalization comes in. But if you think about the accelerating action part, right, I think that what they are saying is equal rights opportunities. How are we pushing that agenda a lot more? So that, for example, at this table, where there are two men, you're seated. That's the action we're accelerating, because it's not in every industry that you have this.
Okay. Yeah, but again, it's also a matter of choice. And I'm thinking in my own very local environment, and that's what conditions my perception to this.
Sure.
I have a family of 8 siblings, 4 boys, 4 girls. Now, equal opportunity to go to school and choose the course you want to do. Nobody does that for you. You do it yourself.
But remember, that was accelerated action that got us there, because initially...
No. At my age, there was nothing like accelerated action.
They don't call it that.
They don't call it that. It's like...
No, there was not even that conversation going on.
No, so it's true. For example,
there was no, at my age, there was no conversation when we were born. There was no such conversation going on.
No, but that's you don't know the conversations that they had.
No. Everybody had their role, especially even in Africa. I understand what of all this thing. Women movement and liberation started in 1970, and that was way over when I was born. So what I'm saying to you is the fact that I have an environment where I have siblings. Some of them older than me, some of them younger than me, but we're all over this age of this conversation of acceleration. But we were given equal opportunity in the house to determine what you become. And it was even worse because my parents were not educated, so they couldn't even determine what course you read. So you have to determine where you read. I used to use it to like one of my elder sister. They gave her a reader. We all come from school with reader. And one day my mother was asking her, and I said, look, every time you bring a reader to the house, it's the same picture that you are showing. Is it this only thing they are showing you in school? So you just look at the picture and you point to the picture. It's just the picture that the text that is written there. Now, you see, those laziness were not as if it were met condition. And that is a point that I am making to say, really, is anybody really holding anybody down?
So okay, let's take what Pri has to say.
So I'm going way away from this.
Okay.
Ladies, women, from, let's say from 24 upwards to like 46, in this time and age, what do they want? And how can the society help them to achieve and get what they want?
Okay. So I think that the question of what women want is like very broad. Remember what I said about everybody wants something different, right? But at the core of it, that's why it was distilled into that equal access, right? And the reason that was distilled is because my equal access might be that I want to be able to get a job at Soup News. The other person's is different, right? So when you say what do they want and how can we help them, right? I think in a very simple way, women want to have equal rights and equal access to opportunities. And the way that society can help them do that is just by making sure that with our platforms, with our skills, with whatever avenues that we have access to, we're not, one, marginalizing people, we're also just pushing that conversation forward, right? You're in a room where you hear something isn't right, maybe speak up for it, right? If you have opportunities, throw it up to everyone, right? I've heard people say, oh, I don't like hiring women because they will marry and they will get pregnant. And the honest truth is, we're also the same society that tells women to marry and get pregnant. So it then feels like you're punishing the woman for that, right? And if I think about what you said and what you said, again, it's still context specific, right? The people that we're having conversations with, every single person has had their own story of either discrimination or whatever. And then when they tell you their story, it's from their point of view, it's from their experience. So I can't sit and say, oh, look, from my experience, this isn't the case. And the reason I can't do that is I wasn't there. I didn't experience it. So what I do is I say, okay, I understand what you're saying. I empathize with you. How do we move forward?
All right, so my follow-up is this. Now, I have worked in places where women are my boss. They call the shots.
Beautiful.
Priye, you get this done and you're getting it done. Right? So, and they could be some of the best bosses because of their peculiarity to understand. And you sometimes when you see women occupy positions, chief executive officers, they occupy top echelons of whether government or private entities, and they are doing fantastically well, both in the corporate sector and even back at home. And one vivid example is the Dora Akunyili I will always refer to, because she was proved to be excellent in her place of work and even back at home. But it looks as if there is this conversation for women that, okay, free access. But the law does not say women cannot become this, women cannot become that. And we say we want free access. But nobody is hindering you. Where is that mentality of free access?
I love that.
Where is it coming from?
That's such a good point. Now, the thing is, it's not written in law. However, it is implemented in rooms, right? For example, right? You walk into a room as a young woman in the corporate space. When you walk in, you're expected to take the back seat. I'm saying this because I've seen it happen so many times. I've had to tell women, come closer, right? Then you're having a conversation, and this happens all the time. You're having a conversation as a young woman, and they're not hearing you. So it's not a function of, like, nobody stood up and said, oh, this woman should not be here. She's sitting there. She's having this conversation. She's giving the insight. She's giving the, data. She's actually doing the work, but nobody's hearing her. A man repeats what she says. And they're like, oh, brilliant. That's a beautiful thing that you have said. And I'm like, this is so interesting. He doesn't know he's doing it. So it's not an outspoken thing. It's not here's a rule that we set. It's just the way that things have happened, right? And the honest truth is, people have come into power, people have held it. I love that you said that women liberation started in 1970, but the truth is, the actual job didn't start in 1970. People have been having conversations and like little rebellious actions since then. I interviewed a 90-year-old woman that was telling me how she got married off to her father's friend when she was like 12 or something, right? And she ran away, they threatened her life, they brought her back. It's like there was all of that. And she was rebelling in her own way. But the thing is, they are not going to come and say, oh, that was her fighting for women liberation. Do you understand? Because like at that point, it didn't have a name. It was just something she knew that she didn't want to be in that situation. So I think that we also need to just remember that generally, it doesn't have to be a rule. Like nobody has to say, I'm not going to hire a woman. It just has to be happening in the back doors, and then women don't get on that table.
Okay. There's a different dimension to this. That the conversation about equality and women is always that the men step down for the women to climb. And we're not actually asking that everybody stay on the same plane to compete. I have a young boy who in the US, and he came home the other day and I asked him, and I said, boy, you're old enough, you should be married. And he said, oh, uncle, I'm afraid, I don't want to marry. And I said, why are you afraid? He said, because I live in a house where my uncle, when I got to America, had 3 houses. Now he has lost these 3 houses to 3 different women.
Oh, wow.
And now I have a woman who tells me that, oh, I love you, but I am open to divorce. So I'm afraid that I'm going to work my life out to just settle one woman. And recently we also saw Donald Trump making this allusion. That should be actually 50-50. People shouldn't be saying, okay, you just rely to say, okay, I bought into this man life because we're talking about women are marginalized and using the opportunity to take undue advantage of men. Who will speak for men?
Okay, so that's interesting because I do not think that the conversation is that men should step down. No. The conversation is that people should open up doors. That's just it. It's like, consider me the way you're considering the other person. It's not I don't think it's you come down, let me come up, because that's unfair. Right? If you look at the core values of like these conversations, it's not an anti-men thing. I always say that it's actually pro-men, right? Because when women are able to contribute a lot more in the house, think about it. Life is very hard these days. I was having a conversation with my mother and she's like, twin-income households are very necessary now. The reason they're necessary is because things are hard, things are expensive. Right? So when you have a woman that's able to earn more, a woman that's able to do more, you have a supporter, like an actual supporter. So the idea is not to be anti-men. The idea is not to press men down. The idea is not to drag power from men. I think that that's actually ridiculous, right? The idea is that as people, we should be working together for actual growth.
Okay, so as a wrap up, to piggyback off what you were saying and just to ask this question, you mentioned feminism before. So for each generation, it seems like there's a new wave of it. Right now, the wave that we're in, it's said to be the 4th wave. And we hear different things that sometimes make women also cringe and like, is this it? Because you have also said that it is not to pull men down. But there seems to be a misconception when we're talking about women's rights and accelerating action and saying, let's have equal rights, gender equality. What do we do? Because Priya was talking about there are no laws stating women cannot occupy certain positions. And you said they are not written, but we see them happen. Which brings us to social engineering. How people have been raised, backgrounds, how they're now wired to think and act. The same thing, there seems to be a subtle, not really subtle, a social engineering going on where some women think that in order to rise, you've got to pull the men down. We had reports of men killing their spouses abroad because some of the men feel that the women that they married once they got there and saw that the society enabled women and protected women's rights, some women also began to abuse it. If it was accelerating action, how do we correct that and accelerate it rightly?
Okay. So I think that we always need to remember that people are individuals, right? I remember that before I even embraced the tag of feminism, for context, I was born in a home that, women and men, nothing, we're the same, right? However, I remember that when the tag came, people started making it seem, oh, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And then somebody said something to me. She's like, oh, you should read a book. It's called Bad Feminist. And I read the book. And we're having a conversation about it. And I realized something. In Christianity, there are bad Christians. We have different types of Christians. We have greedy ones. We have noisemakers. We have liars. We have different types of Christians. However, people don't actually come out and say, oh, Christianity is a bad thing. This is the third wave of Christianity. So I'm wondering why we do that for feminism, right? Because the honest truth is, if I'm an angry person, I'll be an angry feminist. If I may,
or maybe a bitter feminist.
My thing is if I'm a calm person, I'll be a calm feminist. If I'm a loudmouth, I'll be I think at the core of it, remember that you're talking about people, and it's people's personalities that drive what they say. Now, unfortunately, you cannot change a person's personality. What you can do is just keep enforcing the actual core values of what we're pushing and just reminding people. It's not about beating men. Feminism is not anti-men. Feminism is pro-men. Feminism is pro-people. Feminism is pro-women. It's we just need to keep remembering and reinforcing that message.
So what's feminism? Do you say you're a feminist?
Oh no, I already mentioned equal access to rights and opportunities.
That was a mischievous question, by the
Exactly.
way. All right, we need to go here. Thank you so much, Irene Aguh, who is the Chief Executive Officer, Revie, for coming here today. You spoke brilliantly and you made the sisterhood proud.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Very nice to be here.
Thank you very much.
And have the best of the Women Day tomorrow.
Thank you.
And the rest of
very
the
much.
month of March. I will always find a way to rub it in.
But don't forget to do the bill for us.
No, we're not paying any bill at all.